Welcome to this course, Practicing Professional Skepticism in the Work Environment. My name is Tumisani Chirisa. I am a qualified chartered management accountant carrying the designations ACMA, CGMA. I'm also a senior accountant at Troy Financial Services. I will be taking you through this course, which is one of important aspects in the auditing, professional accounting, and tax practitioners' work. It is a very important skill as it can determine the quality of work that these professionals will perform or will do in their work environments. It is a very important skill as it really reflects on how they carry out their work and how they should have a questioning mind whenever they are carrying out their work. For them to be able to identify areas of risks, areas where things are not performing well, or areas where management could have possibly hidden from their work. I mean, especially when preparing financial statements or in auditing those financial statements. Sometimes you might talk to management and everything, and they do not really tell you some of the issues. And with professional skepticism, we ask the right questions, you do the right tests, and it can lead you to find more things that may be hidden. It is a very important aspect, especially in the auditing environment. Okay, let's get into our course. The structure of our course will be as follows. So, topic one, we will introduce you to what is professional skepticism. Topic two, we will talk about how does the auditor apply professional skepticism. This course is more of audit, and we will be talking about auditing environment, but it does apply to everyone else, especially accountants, in every other area that they work in, or tax professionals, as they have to apply the same level of professional skepticism. Topic three, specific applications of professional skepticism. We will go through some areas where it is very important to apply that skill. And topic four, the increasing importance of professional skepticism, especially nowadays in our work environment. Now let's get into topic one. What is professional skepticism? So, in other words, it's coming from the word skeptical, in which you are really having a questioning mind in yourself to question things or to look at things in a different way and try to question things that make up certain something. So it is the same way when you are carrying out your audit duties. There are things that you obviously go during the audit planning, risk assessment procedures and everything. When you are talking to the management of a company, and then you ask specific questions that makes you better understand the work environment, the control environment, the processes within the business, and how they go about carrying out all the everyday activities and how they go about producing a set of financial statements. This will help you obviously to understand where the risk areas are for you to carry out your audit or the actual audit uh, type that you can do, either risk-based auditing or either substantive procedures alone and stuff like that. So by looking at or by listening or by looking at the whole control environment and doing the risk procedures, you're going to use professional skepticism now that let me ask this, I think this part, what if this part, what if that part. So we'll get into detail and we will let you understand or get a better understanding of what professional skepticism is all about. Now, the necessity of professional skepticism in an audit of financial statements has been highlighted in publications recently by the regulatory agencies such as the UK Financial Reporting Council and on an international level, the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board. So these are well-known regulatory agencies, especially in the auditing environment, especially the International Auditing and Assurance Board. It has emphasized much on the necessity of this skill in auditing of financial statements. The purpose of this course is obviously to discuss why professional skepticism is a crucial component of an auditor's thinking, as well as why adopting this attitude when conducting an audit is becoming more and more crucial. So, like I explained, that for us to deliver quality audit work, nowadays it has become very important, and it emanates from some well-noted failures in the world that happened uh, from the 1990s to 2000s, and the international financial crisis that happened in the 2008 period coming forward. And some of the failures that have happened during that period were really also because the auditors that were auditing those specific companies could not pick some very clear or sometimes very clear issues that were happening in those companies. So, for example, there were some trends that were happening in some companies, and the auditors would not pick that as a risk area that would cause such huge collapse in the world. That was the main thing, and it has become emphasized now that professionals need to have this skill. Professional needs to be able to be skeptical about things. Why is this thing happening? And they do the necessary tests to avoid any other huge failures that can impact even the whole world. So that is the purpose of this module. Now, professional skepticism is defined as an attitude that includes a questioning mind being alert to the conditions which may indicate possible misstatement due to error or fraud, and a critical assessment of evidence. So you are given evidence, you are doing audit planning, you're talking to management, you are looking at controls, and you have to have that question in mind to say, no, I think this can be a ground for fraud to happen. This could be a ground for errors to be pushed through to the financial statement. So you're going to have to critically assess any evidence that you are given. So that question in mind is very important. You cannot just be given documents and you say these are correct. You have to go through them, you have to question them, you have to verify them, you have to call maybe any other third parties that are involved in those supporting documents to verify and be sure that whatever information that is going to pull out on the financial statements and that you are auditing is really something that took place and with that accuracy. Now, ISO 200, which is overall objectives of the independent auditor and the conduct of an audit in accordance with international standards on auditing, contains more guidance on how and why the auditor should act with an attitude of professional skepticism. So it contains specific requirements in relation to professional skepticism. So to have more detail, if you would want to have a place where you read about professional skepticism, ISA 200 is the place that you can have more. Obviously, we're going to touch all the most important aspects, but if you want a more for interest sake, you can read ISA 200. The auditor shall plan and perform an audit with professional skepticism, recognizing that circumstances may exist that cause the financial statements to be materially misstated. So this is it. You are performing your work, you are performing your duties as an auditor, you're auditing the financial statements, but throughout this process, from the beginning to the end, it starts from where you are accepting any engagement. And if there are grounds that makes you skeptical about accepting an engagement, or maybe you think you have to also question maybe the previous auditor, as in why, maybe is it because the time period has ended, or is it because there are other grounds that the management wants to move on to another auditor, maybe because there was something. Are there any irregular things that were happening there that needs to be reported? So this is an auditor who is actually performing this skill, professional skepticism, right from the beginning in accepting an engagement. You need to ask those questions. So why are you moving from the previous auditor? And they explain to you, no, it has been a term of 5 years and this is the requirement, and we need to move to find another one as per maybe corporate governance requirements or something like that. Or if it's not the case, then why are they moving from the previous auditor? And we need to have valid reasons that at least makes you certain of what's happening within the business. So so the overall objective is the fundamental driver for the relevant learning outcomes within the auditing environment, namely to discuss the importance of professional skepticism in planning, in performing an audit. So that's the overall objective. The fundamental driver for the relevant learning outcomes within the auditing environment. So we want to discuss the importance of professional skepticism in planning and performing an audit. Right from planning, you're going to apply as an auditor to apply this skill, because that's where you can see where things are going wrong or where things could be corrected or where errors could happen. So those are the risk areas that you need to note when doing audit planning. It is to assess also whether an engagement has been planned and performed with an attitude of professional skepticism, and to evaluate the implications. The application paragraph of ISO 200 contains more guidance on what is meant by applying professional skepticism when conducting an audit. So what we mean by applying professional skepticism when applying audit is that professional skepticism includes being alert to these examples. So you are going to be alert to the audit evidence that contradicts other audit evidence obtained. So maybe you compare also previous audit evidences that you have ever been and you that the company has been audited by before, and you can see on what were noted during those periods, what were the differences in those reports, and that can also give you a starting place to say this could be my risk area. Why did this thing happen? And you can also add on your work. It can be information that brings into question the reliability of documents and responses to inquiries to be used as audit evidences. So remember, during the time of planning, you can talk to those charged with governance or management of the company. And there are certain questions that you ask about their operations, about their work environment, their industry, and for you to get an understanding of the business. And there are some documents that you may request there. For example, if they keep on giving you written responses instead of actual source documents or invoices or stuff, that can bring some questions as into why only written requirements, not invoices, maybe, that are being given to you. So you need to maybe question and maybe ask to see even the other side or the other third parties that are involved in whatever you are auditing at that moment. So information that brings into question the reliability of documents and responses to inquiries to be used as audit evidence. So it can also be conditions that may indicate possible fraud. If you see something that is happening there, for example, let's say it's a business, but it has been constructing an office at their place, and you see that expenses all of a sudden has become fewer. There's a chance that they may be capitalizing expenses that should not be capitalized to the building. So it is very important to also get a schedule of expenses that are being capitalized to the building, do the calculation, go through the list and see if these were really expenses that need to be capitalized. We have had serious cases in the world. For example, in South Africa, we had an issue of a company called Steinhoff that was really committing fraud, but by capitalizing costs that were supposed to be expenses. They were capitalizing them as capital expenditure to assets, so that the expenses become fewer and then profits shows as it has improved. But they were lying to the shareholders, and the company was not performing well. Up until it crashed, and it caused an almost $12 billion US loss to shareholders. This is an example that if you are auditing such a company and you're seeing a lot of expenses being capitalized, it is your responsibility as an auditor to really check and verify if all these expenses should be capitalized. Are they being capitalized in the right manner? If they are, and all those tests that you have to do as an auditor. Circumstances that suggest the need for audit procedures in addition to those required by ISA. So any other things that you feel that you deem fit to do to make sure that the information that you have is free from any of the above, any of error. Essentially, ESA 200 requires the use of professional skepticism as a means of enhancing the auditor's ability to identify risks of material misstatements and to respond to the risk identified. Professional skepticism is closely related to fundamental ethical considerations of auditor objectivity and independence. So obviously, being able to use your skill there, questioning and testing areas that you feel are risk areas, is closely related to that auditor's independence that is required for them to carry out their work, as they should be independent from the management, should do freely and question freely when performing their work. It is closely related because if you are not free or from the management, then your objectivity and the outcome of the audit is in question. So you need to be able to thoroughly ask and thoroughly verify stuff without any problem or any hindrance. Professional skepticism is also linked to the application of professional judgment by the auditor. Actually, it emanates from professional judgment. You're looking at things as a professional with experience. There are things that you will question when you do, and you like, I don't think these things are working well, and I need to verify more. And then that's when you apply your professional skepticism. Now, the audit performed without an attitude of professional skepticism is not likely to be a high quality audit, because from this question in mind is where you assess and where you find your risk areas, the issues that are at hand. Maybe you find that controls are not really working as they are said to be working. So you need to go to do more tests, or you need to change your auditing plan or the audit that you're going to carry, your audit approach. If you were going to carry uh, maybe a combined audit approach in which we're going to test controls and then afterwards do substantive procedures. Now we have to change and focus more on substantive procedures because the control environment seems to not work effectively. So that's already professional skepticism you are applying in doing your work. At its core, the application of professional skepticism should help to ensure that the auditor does not neglect unusual circumstances, oversimplify the results from audit procedures, or adopt inappropriate assumptions when determining the audit response required to address identified risks, all of which should improve the audit quality. Now, on topic 2, as we said, we're going to talk about how does the auditor apply professional skepticism. So the auditor is likely to apply professional skepticism at various stages. In fact, the auditor applies it right from the beginning, right from an engagement, right from actually being approached by a client and starting to plan the engagement. That's where you need to, like, both you're going to question certain things like, can we see any of the previous audit reports? Who was your last auditor? And if there is a need, you contact that auditor, obviously with the approval of both sides. You contact the auditor and question a few things so that you are certain that you are going to engage with the client that is performing in all respect in a fair way. So it is at various stages from client acceptance and at various points during the audit process. And some typical examples are given below in the next slides. So it is going to start when assessing engagement acceptance. At this stage, the auditor should consider whether the management of the intended audit client acts with integrity. So when you are accepting whether to accept or not, you need to be sure that the management that is representing this company is at least acting in an integrity or with integrity. So, and whether there are many or any matters that may impact on the auditor being able to act with professional skepticism. So, is there anything that maybe hinder our independence, our objectivity in carrying our work uh, to the client's environment? So if there is anything that will hinder us, then we're not going to be able to tick all the boxes of the ethical requirements that are needed for us, or professional requirements that are needed for us to carry out our duties, like independence, objectivity, integrity, and stuff like that. Then we won't be able to carry out our duties. So we can actually decline the acceptance of that client. So like I said, such as ethical traits to objectivity and stuff like that. Now, we also do it when performing risk assessment procedures. So an auditor should be skeptical when performing risk assessment procedures at the planning stage of the audit. So right in the planning stage, when you're planning and performing, you're going to note this is a risk area, this could be a risk area, and that could aid you obviously on your risk, on your audit approach, and how you are going to deal with those areas. For example, when discussing the results of analytical procedures with management, the auditor should not accept management's explanations at face value. So yes, they can explain, but you need to go harder and verify and test, recalculate and stuff like that, and should obtain corroboratory evidence for the explanations offered. So you cannot just accept any explanation from management, because it can be used to conceal maybe fraud and stuff like that. You need to be able to go into detail now. If it's a calculation of fair value, let's recalculate. Let's see what was the fair value in the market. You do that research. If there was any independent evaluator, you approach them. What was the process? You find the calculations and the stuff, and you test them to see whether they are really. You do the reworking or recalculation to see if the calculation is coming to the same. Um, if there are any invoices that need to be verified, you can find them. You can ask even the suppliers and stuff like that to verify, to see whether these are the actual invoices. If there's any recalculations of VAT and discounts and stuff, you're gonna do everything that you need to do to verify whatever information that has been given, and not just take it at face value. When obtaining audit evidence, the auditor should be ready to challenge management, especially on complex and subjective matters, and matters that have required a degree of judgment to be exercised by management. The reliability and sufficiency of evidence should be considered, especially where there are risks of fraud. So so it is, like we said, from assessing whether we can accept an engagement, through audit planning, through risk assessment procedures, and when obtaining audit evidence. So it is throughout the whole process. There may also be specific issues arising during an audit that impacts on professional skepticism. For example, if management refuses the auditor's request to obtain evidence from a third party. So if you want to verify something, let's say the bank loan that is on the financial statements, and we want to verify by calling the bank and getting maybe a written agreement or written consent from the bank that validates that loan, and maybe any other mortgage or amortization schedules that we need to get on the side of the bank to see whether these things are really what the bank has, what the company has. And maybe management refuses that obviously gives you a highlight, as in maybe this is wrong, maybe this is not even an actual loan and stuff like that. So that's another thing. The auditor will have to consider how much trust can be placed on evidence obtained from management. For example, evidence in the form of inquiry with management or written representations obtained from management. So there are some evidence that you cannot really get anything besides a written representation by the management. So in those cases, the auditor have to find uh, ways to reduce that risk, that this may not be wrong, that this may be wrong, or this may not be correct. So it is important to have placed some trust And by questioning in the beginning of accepting your engagement and through audit planning, by questioning management, you would have noted the level of trust that you can place on management. And that level of trust can also help you in whether to agree or to commit to any written representations that you would have obtained from the management. So that's why it is important to apply that professional skepticism right from the beginning, because it helps you throughout the process. Now, ISA 200 states that a belief that that management and those charged with governance are honest and have integrity does not relieve the auditor of the need to maintain professional skepticism or allow the auditor to be satisfied with less than persuasive audit evidence when obtaining reasonable assurance. Or it is a belief, obviously, that whenever you are dealing with management, you expect that management obviously works with integrity and honesty. Yes, that's what it's supposed to be. But as an auditor, your work is to question, is to verify and stuff. So it is very important to maintain that mind of questioning and say things could be wrong. These people could be lying. Fraud could be happening, and how can I detect it? For example, those are the issues that needs to be at hand whenever an auditor is doing their work. When evaluating evidence, the auditor should critically assess audit evidence and be alert for contradictory evidence that may undermine the sufficiency and appropriateness of evidence obtained. For example, you may ask for the same evidence in different ways. You may ask for the same evidence maybe by asking let's say the PPE, I mean, for proper planning equipment, you ask maybe for the fixed assets register, and from it you can determine how this how things were being depreciated. You can determine the methods and stuff, and you can even do a recalculation and stuff. But at the same time, you can still ask again for each asset balance, and you can ask for the calculations of depreciation on the other side. So you look in those two documents and see if these things are corresponding, the calculations are the same and stuff like that. This can aid you if maybe to see any contradictory information or any difference in calculations, in application, in valuations, let's say revaluations and valuations of assets, and all those kind of things, and the methods that have been applied, maybe the way of fair valuing the assets. Those things, they need to be obviously in conformity. So if you find things that are contradictory, that could give you much more things to work on and to verify things. So that's why it is important. The auditor should also apply professional skepticism when forming the auditor's opinion. Definitely, when we finally form the auditor's opinion and we have taken note of everything from the beginning and at the end, it does not mean that professional skepticism still needs to end. It will still be used right to the end in forming the auditor's opinion by considering the overall sufficiency of evidence to support the audit opinion. So you want to look at in all, have you been able to get all the information and supporting documents that we needed? If your answer is saying yes, we have been in most cases being able to get all the information that we wanted, then you tick a box. You are saying, okay, this is it. And by evaluating whether the financial statements overall are a fair presentation from the evidence that you have gotten, can you conclude that your financial statements are a fair presentation of underlying transactions and events? If that is fine, then it also means your opinion is going to be um, a good one, an unqualified opinion. But if these things are not being met, are not being achieved, then it means our opinion will differ. Ultimately, the application of professional skepticism should reduce detection risk because it enhances the effectiveness of applied audit procedures and reduces the possibility that the auditor will reach an inappropriate conclusion when evaluating the results of audit procedures. So obviously detection risk, the risk that maybe the controls that are there will not be able to detect issues that are happening in the company that will have a bad thing on the financial statements that will result in our financial statements being materially misstated. So if we can reduce detection risk, we are saying, no, there are no risks there. It means what is pulling out in our financial statements is a fair presentation of what's happening within the business. Then if that's the case,